first question, do we have any VCAPs in the room other than the vSpecialists? So first off, vSpecialists. We have enough vendors up here already, I'm sorry. So vSpecialists, no, but VCAPs, any VCAPs in the room? All right, awesome. All right, out of the VCAPs, DCDs. All right. Actually, any VCDXs? Wah, wah, wah. All right, so it's hard to see all the hands, so VCAP DCDs, stand up.
What a good-looking crew.
All right.
Give them a hand.
All right, and see, next question? Anybody from the panel?
Who wants to come up?
Yeah, out of those who are standing, who would like to be up here?
Anyone want to
Well,
volunteer?
there's one person who's sitting down the fastest.
But he's a Dutch guy, so forget about him.
Yeah.
We're already
we
too
have
many
Dutches
Dutch
up
people
here
on
already.
the panel.
Yeah, no more Dutch people.
He raised his hand. First volunteer.
Yeah, would you like to join us? All right, come on up.
Let's give him a hand.
All right.
How you doing? I'm Chad.
Hey, Robert. Skylar.
I read your blog a lot.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Everyone up here.
Let's get situated here real quick. So
Thanks, Duncan. You know there.
this session is really driven by the audience. We can't answer questions if there are none. So, I know everyone's shy, especially in Las Vegas. So I have some seed questions, but I really don't want to use them. I'll use a couple to start it off, but it's really focused on you guys. So think about what challenges you're having, what issues you're going through. Think about the next 18 to 24 months, what you're planning. Think about what questions you may have in terms of how do we scale, how do we grow, how do we get into VDI. And if you can, please start making lines at one of the two podiums in the middle of the room. So if you can, please start making lines at the podiums. I'll go through some housekeeping things first and have a couple seed questions, but I really hope by the time I get to the question portion that there's some people there at the podiums.
Don't everybody go at once. Slow down. Take your time.
So with that, a quick agenda. I'll go through an introduction. Actually, I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves. And then I'll go over some discussion rules because the previous time we did this, there were one person, Chad Sakich, that stole the show. And we want to keep him controlled. The Venetian Palazzo will not allow me to muzzle him. So, we'll have to set up some rules. And then I have some quick-off questions. And once again, it's up to you guys. So for this to be successful and for us to be in Copenhagen, to be here in San Francisco next year, it's really on you guys. So with that, our introductions. Frank?
My name is Frank Dedeman. I'm a consulting architect working for VMware.
You have your microphone on?
It's on.
It's on, but
Are we muted?
Can we turn up the mics, please?
Try it again now, Frank.
yeah. So my name is Frank. I don't think it works. It's on there.
Can you guys in the back hear him?
You sound a lot better than
Yeah, Duncan
Yeah.
sounds good.
you come to the microphone.
Do I need to do your introduction?
Yeah, it's working. So my name is Frank Dedeman. Yeah, my mic doesn't work. Yeah. I'm a consulting architect at VMware PSO, VCX 29. So that's basically it.
All right. Duncan?
Yeah, my name is Duncan Epping. I'm a principal architect working for the technical marketing, part of VMware as well. I'm a VCDX number 7, and I'm the owner and author of yellowbricks.com, and I wrote a book together with Frank about vSphere clustering for 5.0. You can actually pick it up in the VMware shop today, if it isn't sold out yet.
And be sure and go buy them because they don't want to take them back home with them.
No, we don't.
All right, Scott.
Oh, thank you. Is my mic working? Can you guys hear me okay? All right, good. So my name is Scott Lowe. I currently work on the vSpecialist team at EMC Corporation, VCDX 39, author of 3, soon to be 4 books on vSphere, vSphere 5 book coming out on October 11th. And there's my blog where I've been writing for about 6 years on virtualization-related enterprise technologies.
All right, Chad.
Hi, my name's Chad Sakich. Can you guys all hear me? All right, good. I'm probably the least qualified person on the panel. I'm the VP responsible for all things EMC related and VMware related, how we work together, roadmap, engineering, all that sort of stuff. Have helped Scott with one chapter in his vSphere 4 book on storage. And the best and most important part of my job is frankly the blogging stuff, which is a lot of fun, a lot better than budgets and all that jazz. So nice to meet everybody.
All right, and our special guest.
Sing live? Can you hear me? My name's Robert Simons. I work for I'm a contractor working with a large automotive, well, I don't know whether it's the first one or second one anymore. It keeps on flipping. Doing their VMware implementation, design, and support. It's an environment about 350, 400 hosts located across the world. So it's an interesting, challenging environment.
All right. I'm sure Chad would love to talk to you after the session.
Yes.
There's a reason I don't have hair.
All right, I'm your host, as well as sixth panelist. I'm Rick Shear. I'm part of the vSpecialist organization as well within EMC. Haven't always been a vSpecialist. Been on the team for about a year and a half now. Chad gracefully let me in.
Are you happy?
Extremely happy. I never sleep, and I probably won't get married. I'm about to get married in May to a wonderful woman, and being part of this team will probably cancel that out. But so no, which makes it worse. Yeah, I run a website myself, VMwaretips.com. Been running it for 5-6 years or so. Been working with VMware for close to 8 years, and just glad to be here. This is by far my most favorite show out of all the IT shows.
Woo!
Yeah. Awesome people, awesome technology, and it's great to spend a week with people that love this technology as much as I do. So, with that, some of the rules. So each panelist will have input on the question at hand. So I'm going to allow each panelist at their own opportune time to respond to the question. Each panelist will receive 60 seconds to respond. Sorry, Chad. If the panelist goes over that time, we'll hear. All right.
All right.
It's not the indication to go for the.
Also, this is an agnostic forum, meaning because because we have 3 people from EMC on this session and 2 employees from VMware and 1 very awesome customer. We're going to keep this as agnostic as possible. If there is, however, an awesome technology that a company may have that may help a specific issue, I'll allow that.
I promise I won't go overboard, man.
But with that, you have 60 seconds. So if you want to spend that 60 seconds talking about Project Lightning, then so be it. And remember, we're here to have fun, and it's really about the community. So we blog not to become famous. It's fun having people ask for pictures, but we're not. If we wanted to be famous, we would have gotten into music or movies or something. Especially Chad. So we're here because we love the technology, and we're here because we love to educate. For me, I get more out of teaching someone how to do something on VMware more than anything else. And that's why I started the blog. So, and I think that's probably the same for every single person on this panel.
Yep.
So with that, unfortunately, there is no one at the podium.
Hold on.
Wait, all right.
All right.
I couldn't allow seed questions, so maybe a simple one to start off. There's been a little bit of chatter in your blogs about storage DRS and when it should be enabled, when it's not. So far, I've seen, particularly with EMC, sorry to pick on a product, with their fully automated storage tiering, enabling the fully, I just forgot what it's called now, the term where it'll move it automatically, generally not recommended. I've not heard a lot of detail about why. I have some of my own ideas in my head, but I'd be interested to hear what the panelists say.
All right, so I'll have Scott start this one off. You have 1 minute.
So the general recommendation in using storage DRS with auto-tiering arrays is because of the mechanism that VMware uses to measure latency. If you have I/O metrics enabled for storage DRS and you're asking storage DRS to move VMDKs based on latency requirements, because of the way they measure the latencies right now, they may return inconsistent measurements. And so the recommendation right now is because of that mechanism, we say turn off the I/O metrics piece, go ahead and use it for initial placement, use it for movement based on capacity, but don't use it to make movements based on performance. Let the array do that. And I'm sure that Duncan and Frank would love to delve into more detail in their 60 seconds. But that's the gist of the recommendation.
Okay.
All right, awesome. Duncan, do you have a rebuttal or comment?
Yeah, it's actually not 100% completely technically accurate. What Scott mentioned. Sorry about that, Scott.
That's right.
So one of the reasons we actually tell to listen to the storage vendors around the recommendation for the I/O metric is because of the fact that we characterize the LUNs, and we do that using random read I/O. And when you're using an auto-tiering solution, it could be that all of the random reads are coming off the SSD-based blocks, which means that the characterization of that disk is completely inaccurate because all the other blocks could be backed by SATA disks. So that's one of the reasons. One of the reasons we don't recommend actually using the I/O metric in auto-tiering solutions.
As a follow-up, in case it helps for the rest of the people answering, so I understand what you're saying, but then does that also imply that storage DRS does not? I guess I kind of thought of another one of the benefits as being it's going to give you a real-time monitoring of the performance of your VMDKs of a given VM. So though those characterizations would probably not work correctly, as you said, I would think the overall monitoring of the VMs in question would still be accurate if it's looking at the overall performance and the latency of a given a given disk within a VM.
You better let Chad speak. I think he's going to explode.
Chad, go right ahead.
Okay, I'm going to try and make this really simple. You should always use storage DRS. The only question is whether or not you use the I/O metrics for policy-driven storage vMotions. So first things first, let's try and make it clear and simple. I can't speak for other array vendors' recommendations, but EMC's is always use storage DRS. If you're using fast, don't use the I/O metric. The point, you guys actually said kind of the same thing using different language, is the performance is nonlinear, right, within a single data store, right? So depending where the data is at any given time.
Right.
You can still use storage I/O control, by the way, on top of it. It's not like turning on storage I/O control is something that you can no longer do, right? And that has benefits in other use cases as well. The only other thing that I would add is two things. Number one, storage DRS doesn't move between tiers. They all have to be the same policy, the same grade. So you don't get the benefit of SSD and that being blended. The second thing is, in the future, go to VSP1425. Almost at it. We're doing something funky there, so just...
Yeah, so basically, can you hear me though, or is my mic still off? Okay, cool. Use initial placement only in the beginning, and then when we have more information, start to look at I/O load balancing.
Okay.
Yep.
Does our customer on the panel have any input, any use of?
Not at this point.
At this point, are you part of the vSphere 5 beta?
Played around with the code, wasn't supposed to have the code.
Roger.
If someone puts it in your hands, what are you supposed to do? I'm not supposed to touch it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, on the side.
One of the things I got really excited about this week is the vCenter appliance. And I'm curious about you guys' opinion. Do you think it's going to be implemented by a lot of people? Or is there going to be issues with plugins if you use the appliance versus the Windows-based? What about VMview and Closer? So what do you guys think about the vCenter appliance?
Frank, do you have any input on this?
Yeah, I have a question. So what do you mean by plugins?
vCenter plugins.
Well, EMC plugin, so I can talk to my storage array from Virtual Center.
Okay.
I assume the same plugin won't work on the storage appliance, or not storage appliance, the Virtual Center appliance.
Well, I actually cannot answer that question. I don't know. So maybe the other guys know.
Sure.
The best benefit of the virtual appliance is that you have a solution that you just can roll out and use instantly without setting up your Windows system and a database system. So from a management perspective or an operation perspective, I think it's a good change. So maybe Chad or Scott can talk about
By any chance, were you an online submitter? Did you submit a question online about that? Oh.
So can I go next, man?
Yeah. So to add on to that question, there was an online submission. Someone asking about the vCenter appliance in terms of not compliance. That's what I'm looking for. Supportability for any vendor plugin that would snap into it. And the other part of the question, which maybe you can answer as part of your answer, is will the appliance do everything that vCenter Server does today in a Windows platform? And will it be as scalable and resilient and reliable as the Windows version is today? So, Chad, with that.
Go ahead, Chad.
If you ask me, it's a good first take. I don't think a ton of customers are going to use it in production because it has a fair number of limits that even once you move past a certain size are going to be problematic. It does bust not only the EMC plugin, but almost any plugin. The plugins are designed obviously to plug into the ongoing kind of Flex platform that's being used for vCenter. And long term, by the way, that is the direction and deployment model for vCenter, but it's the first take. And it not only busts the EMC plugin, it'll bust any plugin because they're designed to be Windows installed executables even to begin with. They work on the framework, on the UI framework, but the installer gets broken and all that stuff. But the plugins are a secondary thing. I think people are going to try it. They're going to love it. The deployment model rocks. But there are a pretty long set of limits that you actually did a blog post about.
Yeah, I think the main thing, if you look at the vCenter appliance, is the fact that VUM is not, so Update Manager is not directly supported on the appliance itself. So that means you will need to have a second virtual machine running with Windows and Update Manager to actually achieve the same thing that you could normally do on a single box. So that kind of eliminates the benefits you would have with a single appliance. So
and SRM too, right?
And Site Recovery Manager is another problem, and View, for instance, as well.
And why are they busted? Because the plugins don't work.
So the plugins are indeed, like Chad said, they are Windows-based. So I would suggest to start looking into it for your lab environment, demo environment, things like that. You know, it's definitely the way that we will head to in the future, but it's not fully production ready at the moment, at least not for larger shops.
So on the flip side of that, real quick, everything they said is absolutely accurate. But for smaller organizations that may not need that functionality, the deployment model is great. Yeah. It comes bundled with all the stuff you need to do auto deploy. So it comes with its DHCP, its own TFTP, et cetera, et cetera. So it does offer SMB, smaller markets, test dev environments, a good option to roll that out if the use case is right.
Yeah. Two things regarding that. One, the shop that we're in has 8 different virtual centers linked in link mode, and link mode requires Atom. Atom is Microsoft, thus if you're rolling it out, you're only looking at one virtual center. The other thing is that if you get beyond the point of what you can use as the built-in PostgreScript database, you're then moving over to Oracle. And from an SMB perspective, I don't see a lot of SMBs out there running Oracle.
All right. Thank you very much. One thing I wanted to add as part of the vCenter appliance, like Chad said, it is a 1.0 product. It's a solid showing of where the direction of VMware is going with the product, and it's awesome. Any way to get away from having to stand up a Windows server just for a single application or single use is great. A vApp or a virtual appliance really should be the way all organizations, all ISVs should go in the future. But because it is that 1.0 version, there's going to be a lot of limitations. But I think for the SMB market, it possibly is a great pairing if you have a 2 or 3 node cluster. Maybe you're doing the VSA along with it, and you have everything all contained there in a very easy use package. So from the right side.
One other thing to add on there. One thing that I have seen from an operational perspective is appliances are a pain in the arse to keep updated. From a VMware tools perspective, had a lot of issues with some various different VMware appliances. and from a patching perspective. So that may be another consideration when looking at that.
For what it's worth, short thing on that, it's a recognized problem. The ISVs, EMC is an ISV, not just a hardware vendor. We're trying to build new ways of patching virtual appliances, which is that thing that we talked about, the vCube idea. But you're right, totally.
Yeah, and actually Update Manager supports updating virtual appliances as of 5.0 as well. So it's actually a problem we're looking into solving.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right. From the right side.
Hi. I'm looking for advice, best practices in setting up VMs that need to support very large storage, like in hundreds of terabytes. I work at NASA, by the way, so if you think about it regarding satellite images and stuff like that, we have individual VMs that support hundreds of terabytes down the road.
Chad, I'll let you open this one.
So today, in that use case, if again, in this forum you don't get a lot of detail, so you can come and ask afterwards if you'd like. In that use case, I'd use in-guest approach. So I'd basically boot the VMD case. It sucks that you're breaking encapsulation models and all that stuff, but I'd basically do an NFS mount into a guest. You can drive lots and lots of performance that way. There's other in-guest approaches. I wouldn't use RDMs because they become a management problem.
It's interesting you mentioned that. Currently, we're using lots of RDMs. Obviously, 2 terabyte minus 512 byte limit. We set up a lot of them and obviously create an LVM under Linux. That's how we're doing it now. I searched all your blogs and I didn't find any solutions, so basically I was stumped. That's not the only reason I'm here, but I figured I'd come to this session and see what you guys have to say.
You have to use an in-guest kind of method like that. The other thing I wanted to just highlight, I kind of blurted out the last time, VSP1425 previews what we think is the longer-term picture of keeping encapsulation but having storage models that work better for those sorts of use cases. But today, you either have to use RDMs, which I'm not a big fan of, or use NFS mounts inside guests.
Okay.
All right. Any comments from the panel
Yeah,
or
I guess
rebuttal?
the thing to add to that is that with vSphere 5.0, RDMs actually go up to 64 terabytes. So it's not the hundreds of terabytes that you were talking about, but at least it's coming close. But like Chad said, the session that he mentioned, that's definitely one to check out around storage futures.
It got repeated, by the way. If you don't see it on the agenda, it got popular, and there's a couple of repeats now.
Wednesday and Thursday, I believe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As the customer on the panel, do you fall into that area at all where you have to deal with large file sizes?
The amount of times that I've talked to people going and saying, hey, we can use an RDM and we can go over the 2 terabyte limit, I'd be a millionaire if they gave me like 10 cents every time that happened. Feel the pain. I've heard of people using iSCSI through the guest also to do those large mountings, but right now at our perspective, we've had some file servers that we've done P2Vs over, and just because of the size, we place them into RDMs, but we haven't quite broken that 2 terabyte limit yet.
Yeah. There were good reasons to do RDMs in the ESX 2 and 3 product, but with 3, 5, and 4 and beyond, I'm recommending to all my customers to try and run and hide from RDMs as much as possible, because it causes too much of a tie between your virtual infrastructure, that VM and application, and the back-end storage. And the great thing about virtualization is you want everything to be fluid and mobile and easy to move as possible. And RDMs just prevent that. So the in-guest method is really the only option. With VMFS 5 supporting 64 terabyte data stores and VMDKs will help resolve that as well, but the in-guest method, I think, is the best answer to answer your question. Left side.
A lot of the departments that I work with looking at geographically diverse data centers. And I was just kind of curious, what do you see as key design decisions to have geographically dispersed workloads and maximizing mobility between data centers?
So as the two authors of an awesome HA and DRS book, I think this plays very, very well into that discussion. So Duncan, can you start us off?
It's a very difficult discussion, though, because the main thing around that is storage, which I'm actually not the top expert on. That's probably Chad and Scott. From an HA perspective, I think the most challenging thing is how you set up the cluster itself. So if you have any DRS affinity rules, for instance, and how HA will interact with those rules. So what we've seen in the past with geo-clustering solutions for 4.1 at least, is that it was quite difficult to set up those clusters because you had the primary node, secondary node concept, and that's one of the reasons that most geo-clusters were limited to 8 nodes, because otherwise there wouldn't be a primary node around to actually start up, restart your virtual machines. Well, with 5.0 that actually has been solved. With 5.0 the primary, secondary node concept doesn't exist anymore. There's a new concept which is called master-slave, and in case a master would actually fail or would stop working for whatever reason, one of the slave nodes will actually be elected to become the master. Buy the book.
Duncan, if you want to finish your thought.
Well, like I said, so when a slave or when a master would actually fail, a slave will actually be elected to become the master and would start restarting the virtual machines. So that actually solved the issue. Or there's some of the constraints we had around actually creating your cluster in a geo-cluster environment. But like I said, the key thing is storage, and I'm pretty sure Scott is going to talk about that right now.
Yeah, so Scott, you've actually been working a lot with vPlex technology.
Yes.
So
Yes.
can you input a little bit?
Yeah, and we he and I have actually chatted before. So you do need a storage solution that addresses how workloads will move back and forth when you have a geographically dispersed cluster, or a stretch cluster, split cluster, whatever term you want to use. There are a number of different solutions from a variety of vendors. EMC has one. NetApp has one that they use on NFS called FlexCache. Ours is EMC vPlex. These solutions have pluses and minuses, caveats and advantages. Yeah, left hand does it. Thank you. I think HDS says they do as well.
Not really.
Okay, that's fine. So I said they say they have. But those are the considerations to worry about. Duncan's absolutely right on the HA side. Lots of improvements there. But you do have to pay close attention to your affinity rules and such.
So this is an easy one. Literally, Lee Dilworth from VMware and I are doing a joint session on this. If you're interested in this topic of stretch clusters, do's, don'ts, what you need to know, when SRM is a better choice, when a stretch cluster is a better choice, and also futures of what we're both doing in that space. It's BCO 2479, which is at 4 o'clock today. The storage thing is one topic. The other one is network. So, you saw that stuff in Steve Harrod's keynote about the, layer 2 adjacency problem. So right now you've got to have a stretched layer 2 network, layer 2 adjacency. You have to have an active storage model, and then there's all this HA and DRS stuff. What I would call out with vSphere 5, host affinity rules are supported in this configuration. It's not public yet in a big way, but it will be soon. We're working on hardening the HCL rules around this between VMware and EMC, because we see, and others, we see a lot of people shooting themselves in the foot, frankly. Lots and lots of stuff kind of coming to harden that use case. Also, heartbeat data stores. Heartbeat data stores help in partition use cases. So lots of improvements from 4.1 to 5.0.
And you also need to consider the possibility of a split brain situation where you dark fiber between the two data centers will move, because both sides will be up and running. So HA has some mechanisms for that, or at least it cannot always detect that there's a split brain. So you need to take that into account when designing. So it's not only storage and compute, it's also your network.
I'll just say this. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of customers using SRM. There's tens to low hundreds of customers globally that use stretched cluster models. So if you're a customer out there thinking of what you should do, without knowing any of your details, it's far more likely that SRM will be a better use case. There are cases where stretched clusters are very good, though.
Does that help?
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, from the right side.
Hi. My question actually comes from VSP1425, that session yesterday. I thought that was an excellent session on the tech preview for
Did you like the demos?
What's that?
Did you like the demos?
Oh, they were awesome.
We worked hard on those, man.
I mean, very impressive. And I left there kind of with more questions, than I got answers. But I mean, it was a tech preview. But I'm curious well, first off, when are you guys going to start blogging about technical details on that and how it's going to play with storage DRS? And since there's no more data stores, there's no more LUNs, how's that all going to play?
Okay, so boy, this is dangerous territory for me. And I'm the one who will take the heat the best.
Yeah, it's even worse for us. So.
You go ahead. So
We'll just sit back.
we're just gonna watch.
So, Satyam and Vinay and Vijay and Naranya, please, I'm going to follow the rules I've been told to say on this. So, it's a technology preview. So we can't say too many details about names and dates and those sorts of things. For people who didn't see it, it's a preview of an idea called VM volumes where you have some connectivity to the array, which can be block or it can be NAS, but then all management models are around VM objects, VM volumes, right? So there'd be no more management of LUNs, of data stores, and the future of VASA would be VASA wouldn't report a data store behavior or a set of data store behaviors. A pool could report many data store behaviors, saying I could create a VM that looks like this, or like this, or like this, or like this. There will be a series of blog posts about this that are all queued up and ready to go. We're having discussions around what the right way to do that is, because it's always sensitive when you're previewing something that's a little bit out there, right? I will say this. The whole storage vendor community is a big supporter of the idea. Not just us, but many others. As you saw through the demos, EMC is in a great position because we're working very hard. just to wrap up, the current thing that we're thinking is post-Copenhagen, we'll put up some blog posts.
Oh, okay. That's sooner than I was expecting.
That's debatable, so I can't commit, but that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for your question.
Boy, I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, dude.
All right, from the left side.
Small shop. I have one storage array with its wide stripe Hitachi, so essentially all the same disks. And right now I have 4 data stores because of the old 2 terabyte limit. Coming around with V5, I'm probably just going to start new ones, start migrating things to that. In that scenario, is there any point of having one 5 terabyte LUN, 2 terabytes, and just storage DRS when it's all the same disks in the end? It's wide striped. Is there any pros? Is storage DRS going to start moving between both LUNs, and in all reality the blocks don't go anywhere? I know it's probably a small case, but
No.
All right, who wants to start?
I'm trying to.
Who'd like to?
All right, I'll take a stab at this. So if the data is already wide striped across all the disks in the array anyway, and you're not tied to RAID groups or aggregates or anything of that nature, in my mind, and this is just from my perspective, and I'm sure there will be others that are also equally valid, the key factor in that case would be RPO, RTO. How many VMs do you want to set in a single data store? How long will it take you to back them up? How long will it take you to restore them in the event of a problem? And that would really be more of a gating factor than some of the other things. I mean, you're wide striped. You potentially could look at the number of VMs on there. You didn't mention what vSphere version you're running, so
4.1. I'll be going to 5. I was thinking
5.0. Do you have VAA offloads on your? Okay, so if you got hardware accelerated locking, then the idea of the number of VMs on the data store is irrelevant. It really comes down to how fast can you back it up, and how fast can you restore it. These objects, because typically we back up and restore, whole data stores or something of that nature. So that's kind of my initial stab at it.
Yeah, so like you said, it's striped across all disks in your disk pool, right? But you still have to manage the queue depth to the data source. So although you have on the physical layer striped across all disks, so your device model will be the same, you still have to manage. Still have to manage the latency of each VMFS data store. So in that case, you still can use storage DRS and I/O load balancing.
So what Frank is basically saying is that latency isn't only caused by your disks, it's also caused by the path on the way to your disks. So it's also the fabric that could cause a specific type of latency, or even the kernel. And storage DRS takes all those 3 into account. So from that perspective, it's probably best to have multiple devices. So that means you have multiple queues as well, which storage DRS can take into account. Otherwise, you end up with a single queue. When that queue is filled up, there's no other way to go.
Does our special guest have any rebuttal or comment? All right. Awesome. So, when designing out storage considerations for virtualized environments, there was really 2 main things we looked at One, obviously, is performance. So having enough spindles on the back end, array cache, et cetera, to service the IOs needed by the VMs. You're somewhat limited to what you can do because you're just wide striping over every single disk. The second thing was, we would separate because of locking, and with VAI in 4.1, and beyond, that really squashes that issue. So looking at controlling I/O in other ways with like SIOC, I think that's where Frank was going with that, right? You're talking about like SIOC control.
Well, yeah, SIOC is used in storage DRS, yeah.
Right.
So storage DRS, I'll say it again, there's no reason to not use it, right? Period. So just like SIOC debates occurred in 4.1, EMC recommendation was always use it. The only thing that we're talking about is the earlier dialogue on that one. I will say this, queues matter with block models. They still matter. There's always these furious debates about many devices, lower number of devices. I'm personally a believer that keeping things simpler is better as a starting point. And the most important skill to have as the administrators of these environments is to know what to look for, right? So like, there's no one right answer, but like, let's say that you set up 3 data stores, you put them into a data store pool, you use SDRS for placement and movement, even though they're all white striped on the back end, you're going to get more queues and stuff like that, which is fine. Likewise, if it's simpler for you and you don't have a problem now, go to town. Keep it in one big data store and use SDRS still. It doesn't hurt, right? It's not going to cause any problems.
It's not going to do anything either. It's just one data store.
Right.
Nowhere to move to.
But nowhere to move, right? But my point is, it's not going to hurt, and you'll actually get some alerts and reports, right?
Yeah, that might be useful.
So the point is, do it anyway. It doesn't hurt. But the thing that is know how to find when the queues are full.
Thank you.
Which is QD.
All right.
Yeah, I'm a VP, baby. Still a nerd.
Still kicking ass on the Vodgeball court, too. All right.
We still have a lot of image servers, data, basically 10 terabits up to 50 terabits on servers. I always thought it would be better to move to kind of a CIFS solution, but we're not going to do that. So what we had done previously is P2V, like just the C and D drive, and then actually use the RDMs for all the other drives, for all the other datas and stuff. I'm excited about the ESX5 because my theory is I do the same step, but then I'd do a step at the end where I do storage vMotion and then move those RDMs to my VMFS5. Am I missing anything with that kind of thought process, or are there things I'm going to need to be concerned about?
So when you P2V, did you check your alignment of your disks?
No.
Okay, so that's one thing you need to be aware of.
What operating system, if you don't mind us asking?
Unfortunately, we still got some Windows 2000 and 2003s.
Yeah, so 2000, 2003 are going to come in misaligned by default, and that could cause I/O performance problems. The 2008 and later will come in properly aligned, so just check that, and that would be definitely something to check on.
The one thing I'm always surprised at is there are really good enterprise NAS solutions on the market. Yes, EMC's got them, NetApp's got them, other folks have got them. I'm always surprised that people still have file servers. It's in this, like, just get rid of them. Put it on a NAS device, and if it's not us, it's cool, right? But then you don't even have the VM running the guest, and you don't have to worry about any of these problems. Just as a thought.
Our management don't want to go through that process, going through that change.
Right.
So to them, it's still a 2003 server if it's virtual or physical. So that's why.
Fair enough. Thank you.
For what it's worth, we have a secret Uber alignment tool coming. Stay tuned on that one. That'll help with that process on NAS.
Yeah, you're not. The secret's out now.
Thanks.
Hey, everybody, we have this really secret thing we're doing, and here's what it does.
Sorry, Nick Weaver.
From the left.
I was curious. The question of scale up versus scale out is coming up, and when you're constructing your nodes, I was curious what you thought the sweet spot was in terms of CPU and memory assignment to those nodes, given the current pricing of that hardware.
I actually wrote an article about that a couple of weeks ago, and it's It's not really that complicated, but it will depend on the amount of virtual machines that you're running, the amount of memory that these virtual machines require, the CPU load of those virtual machines, and you need to translate that to the amount of hosts that you would possibly need, and basically do the math. And what I've noticed in the past, at least the last 6 months or something like that, that 2-socket service with 196 gigs seems to be the sweet spot. Seems to be the sweet spot these days, especially if you look around things like licensing, which I actually don't want to mention. But even from a Microsoft perspective, scale up does start to make a lot more sense, in my opinion, and also from an operational perspective, because you will end up having less devices to manage as well.
And something additional, when you start to think about scale up or scale out, is to right size your virtual machine.
Yeah.
So not only looking at your hardware, it's also looking at the fitment of the placement and the fitting of the virtual machines on your hardware, because that can really change and really can affect your performance of your virtual machines. So
lots of good stuff online about how to do it.
I'd say right sizing is also going to have a huge impact on licensing now too.
As well, yeah.
I think the change in licensing that's come out in version 5 has thrown a real loop into the question of whether you're going to be scaling out or scaling up. I know I'm in the middle of the deployment of 150 ESX hosts that are affected by that licensing change, because we went with two socket blade servers with 192 gigs worth of memory, and that's going to hurt.
So the only thing I would add is everyone still conflates the physical RAM on the server with the VRAM model. None of us are licensing experts. We're nerds. But, just make that distinction. There's some good PowerShell tools that can help you figure out exactly what you need to pay, and et cetera, et cetera. If it were me, I'd keep it pretty vanilla. I'd stay 2-socket, 96 gigs of RAM, call it a day, except for my monster VMs. The only driver for a huge, massive thing would be if you had some workload that needed that. Although, to Frank's point, more often than not, people overbuild those VMs to start with. Like they think they need, the VM with a terabyte of RAM and, 8 vCPUs, and the reality is they don't. So.
I hate to step in on that question, but I was right behind him, and I pretty much had the same question, but I want to take it a step deeper without necessarily changing topics. Is that okay?
Yeah.
A question around the sizing of sockets and whatnot. Intel really messed everybody up a few years back when they went from 1 socket to 2, and then 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 10, and now all of a sudden we have all this excess CPU on our hosts, and now memory is the contending factor, something VMware decided to address with their licensing as well. And now we're starting to have underutilized hosts. So we're back to having hosts where memory is maxed out and CPU is not. I've talked to a variety of hardware vendors, and the argument over the 2-socket versus the 4-socket model is coming up back and forth from vendors, whether it be Blade or Rack and Stack as well. And I just have some concerns going forward with there's some deviation I'm seeing right now in the industry from companies like Cisco and IBM. People are pushing Blades on one side and Rack servers on another and saying, 20 real beefy 1 terabyte physical chassis versus a bunch of Blade centers. It's better to go with the big ones instead of the small ones. From a price point, the hardware, the 4-socket systems are just far more robust with massive amounts of capability, and they're actually cheaper per watt to run virtual machines on.
Well, if you look at it from a price perspective, so it's not only the price of the box itself, but there's a couple of other things that you need to take into account as well. So if you have more boxes, you will need more rack space, power cooling, things like that. On the other hand, if you have less boxes, think about the I/O ports that you need. If you've got a 10 gig infrastructure, that means you might need 2 or 3 times less I/O ports than you would require otherwise, and there's a substantial cost associated with that as well, and that's something that people tend to forget. Another factor that you need to keep in mind is managing those boxes as well. So think about firmware updates. There's a cost associated with that as well, which is something people usually don't factor in because it's quite difficult to factor in, but it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Where's your comfort level too? Because
that's my question. Is wondering whether VMware has any. If I stack 250 virtual machines on a server, how long is it going to take to HA? Is that a serious factor for VMware to understand? I mean,
most of the industry I see are trying to peak at around 40 VMs on a host to be able to withstand that kind of failover.
The problem that I have with the build up category is hardware fails. Right? It will always fail. Now the question is, will it fail while it's in production or after you decom the box or something along those lines? If you lose 40 production VMs, what's your day going to be like? Because HA may recover them all. That's great, wonderful, but you're still going to be having an outage. And I've been on those phone calls with 25, 30, and it's an uncomfortable phone call beyond.
So I think that part of the thing we have to factor in here, in addition to all of the factors that have been mentioned, which are all absolutely accurate, is following on his comment, is that you have to understand the workloads you're going to be running and be sure and take in that fault domain into account. And you may have different groups of VMs or hosts. You may have hosts with workloads that are not as sensitive, and you can have a larger fault domain. You may have workloads that are more sensitive, and you need a smaller fault domain, and therefore can address a faster recovery. So that's something else to consider. It has to be a holistic discussion. It can't be just, how much does it cost, or what is the licensing, or how much can I cram in there. You have to look at the kind of the whole picture.
No, I'm gonna close off the discussion here. We spent a lot of time on it, but I think what it comes down to is the fault domain. We can load 250 machines on a single ESX host, and actually I'm all for that. That's awesome. The more the better. But if that host goes down, what's it going to impact? And there's some great technologies built into HA, around affinities, separation of worker nodes, on larger scale applications. So you're not having all of those, all of the same nodes for that one application on one host. Separation using affinities, could help lessen the impact if that host were to go down. All right. So from the right side.
I work at a solar manufacturing company, and all of our servers are virtualized, and we run on NetApp on NFS. And so we're we're
virtualized. Yay, NetApp.
Go on.
So our goal is to do snapshot-based backups for everything, but with the manufacturing servers, they're really busy, a lot of I/O, and the freezes in the guests sometimes can be too long, and it'll cause the applications to fail over when they should have, and I've even seen split brain, so I ended up having to split them onto different data stores on different snapshot schedules. I tried that first, so at least if it failed over, they wouldn't both happen at the same time, and I ended up with the split brain. Is there anything I can do to fix that? Because I prefer the backup to just fail and then try again later than to pause the VM.
Every customer that I talk to, whether they're using EMC or NetApp, NFS data stores that use file-level snapshots as their way to capture point-in-time, quote-unquote, backups, inevitably finds that they need to turn off the in-guest tools VSS quiescing due to timeouts, right? Like, you're not alone.
Okay.
Right? So just quick one. If you ask me, I think storage vendors do customers a disservice when they position snapshots as a primary mechanism for backup and recovery. So what I would do if I were you is I'd embrace the fact that that's how it's going to work. There's nothing near term that is going to solve that dramatically. There's longer term stuff. And I would use non-quiesced stuff in the guests, right, and just do the array-based snapshots as the way to go, and then use that as my, oh no, I just did something really bad recovery mechanism, but not call that a backup. Have a full-blown backup solution along with it.
Okay. That was kind of what I was going with for now. I mean, it'd be nice to have a place to start. It is manufacturing, at least somewhere to start, so that I don't have to stand up a VM, put the agent in, and start restoring to it.
The vast majority of the time, you're going to have a clean guest, right? But since it's not quiesced, it might not be.
Right.
Right. Don't get me wrong. Both NetApp and EMC are both working with VMware on that problem to try and make it better. But there's just nothing that's going to come right around the corner and solve it.
So is it better in VMFS? Have you seen that problem, or is it the same deal? Busy guest is a busy guest, and it can still freeze the.
Just that's the array-based snapshot things are awesome for the oh no recovery. They make for great, sexy sales demonstrations. They do not make for good, comprehensive backup and recovery mechanisms.
Okay.
Right? They don't have a lot of application integration. I just think that there's a different category of solutions around there that use, the vStorage APIs for data protection. You don't have to have an agent inside every guest, and you can have a more comprehensive backup solution. Again, I think snapshots are part of it, just not a holistic answer.
Well, even VCP or whatever cause the same issue. So even if I'm backing up anything that uses a snapshot to start the backup, regardless if I'm trying to back up the whole VMDK, it still causes the same problem.
They do use a different call, a different mechanism. So I'll take it offline if you want to discuss it further.
Yeah.
Okay. Unless there's anything else to add.
No, agreed.
All right. So with that, I'd like to take just one last question, and if I can, sorry, Chad, stay away from the storage topic,
please.
So, who was there before? It was all right. So with that, I'm really sorry to the other questionnaires. Please feel free to come up after the session, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. But as far as the session's concerned, one more question.
And please fill out the survey if you guys can. Give us feedback.
Absolutely.
Very welcome.
I have a generic non-storage questions. What's your favorite or highest impact favorite 5 new features in vSphere 5?
5 new features in vSphere across 4 panels. That means we have to come up with 20.
Piece of cake.
25.
Actually, I like that question a lot. So if we have just about 5 minutes left. So let's take 30, 45 seconds. Each panelist tell the audience your favorite 5 new features of vSphere 5.
Start, Duncan.
Well, I'm going to pick all the obvious ones. I guess HA is probably one of my favorites. It's a complete read-write. Basically, all the constraints you had with HA in the past have been eliminated. The second one would be storage DRS. For obvious reasons, it's going to simplify your life. It will allow you to create a data store cluster and balance workloads across those data stores in those data store cluster. The other one is profile-driven storage because it's the way of the future. Using profiles, link those to specific virtual machines, check out if they're compliant, and move those virtual machines around based on the information provided by profile-driven storage. The fourth one would be vMotion. It has some really cool enhancements, so you can use multiple VM kernel ports to actually do the vMotion. So that means the vMotion will complete faster than before. And the fifth one would be the storage vMotion mirror mode driver, which I think is really cool because of the fact that it will enable us to do a lot of very cool stuff in the future. What mirror mode basically does, it mirrors I/O between the source and the destination when there's a write to an already copied block. And although we only use it for storage vMotion right now, there's a whole slew of opportunities to use it for other techniques as well, I guess. Frank.
So
Quickly.
On top of Duncan's list, I would say virtual NUMA for big virtual machines.
Yeah.
So we bring specific NUMA information to virtual machines who has more than 8 vCPUs configured at this moment. Another one which I really like is the sliding scale of the function minimum free percentage of the memory. So the amount of memory it reserves for itself. So it used to be 6%. If the memory was consumed memory was more than 94%, ESX will start to reclaim memory. And now it's a sliding scale, so based on the hardware configuration of the ESX host itself, it will reduce the amount of reserved memory. So it saves a lot of memory, and that's really something which will drive higher consolidation ratios per box. So,
Chad, do you have a couple to throw in there?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in storage resource pools and resource models becoming simpler. So lump me in as a super fan of storage DRS and policy-driven storage. I think that the VSA, the vSphere Storage Appliance, is going to open up new markets and new use cases beyond just the lab stuff that will be very useful for a lot of customers. I can think about funky use cases for VDI, for View, for all sorts of stuff around that with solid state on server. People don't focus on it, but if you're at a customer who understands this problem and who has ever undergone an audit, the vSphere 5 DLP, embedding the secure, basically catching those bad swear words and credit cards and stuff like that without having an agent inside the guest is a game changer relative to the way that people have been doing data loss prevention in the past. It's now an order of magnitude easier to do it on a VM and say, yeah, I'm compliant with HIPAA or PCI or whatever, than it is to do on a physical host. So not something in infrastructure folks' day-to-day life, but if you're a security officer, it is a big, big deal. Also, I'd say vSphere Replication 1.0 has some limits, but again, there's lots and lots of funky use cases and SRM5 improvements I'm a big fan of as well.
Scott, a couple?
Yeah, so most of my changes are kind of behind the scenes. I'm with Duncan. I like the SV mirror driver for storage vMotion. I love the improvements in vMotion and the way they parallelize that and allow you to use multiple NICs. This is a little change, but one that I really like, the clarity around virtual disk types. Now it's clear, thick, eager 0, thick, lazy 0, and thin. So that's nice. No more which type is it, we don't know. I also am really happy with the T10 standardization of the VAI commands and the improved thin provisioning awareness and UNAP support.
And our customer guest.
HA improvements, that's going to help a lot. Storage DRS and vMotion, being able to vMotion something and not need to figure out what the flipping resource pool that it was in originally was. Just be able to say neck.
Yes, yes.
All right. I have a couple. My two favorites, auto deploy. ESX auto deploy. Come on, it's awesome. I can just turn on a box and it's an ESX server in seconds. The other big one I completely forgot, but it's really awesome
really cool.
too.
So that's
actually no. So actually, I do remember the fact that we can do 32 processors. That's awesome because I have a lot of customers that have big iron running database servers and they couldn't virtualize them, and now they can. So that's huge.
So I have one more, multi-NIC support for vMotion. That's really awesome.
Multi-NIC support. Yep.
Yeah.
So with that, thank you very, very much for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Please.
Thanks, everyone.